everyone. How's it going? Welcome back to the Think On It podcast, Season 2, Episode 3. Think On It's a podcast brought to you by Faircreek Church, and it's really here for you to help you thrive in your faith. I'm Grayson, and this is Matt.
Hey, everybody.
We're your host for the show, and this is our very special guest, Sharlene Trout. Sharlene's our kids director for Kids Street, so you really oversee the nursery through 5th grade, and then you're a mom, you're a grandma, you've got 4 awesome grandkids.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they call you Lolly.
Lolly and Pop.
Lolly and Pop.
Get it, Lollipop.
Lollipop.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And we're really in the middle of a series on Sunday mornings here and a series in the podcast where we're talking about the stages of faith. So we've talked about the explore stage where we're really just trying to figure out. We've got a lot of curiosity. We got a lot of questions about faith. Last week we talked about the build phase where it's all about learning and acquiring knowledge. And this week, I think a lot of people find themselves in this own stage. And the own stage is really known as like the productive stage or the doing stage. It's the stage where faith is really all about what you're doing for God. And I think most people probably find themselves bouncing between the own stage and the build stage a lot in their life. I know I kind of, that's something that I relate with, is kind of bouncing between those two.
Yeah.
How about y'all?
Yeah, I think bouncing back and forth, one, it's natural. It makes some sense. And like we've talked about, it's not a linear process. So there is going to be some, quote unquote, back and forth because of the fact that, once you start doing things, you don't necessarily stop learning. Of course, you want to continue to be learning, and you're always going to be continuing to do that. So there's definitely some natural going back and forth. But like we've kind of discussed some of the pitfalls or the traps with getting stuck in any one particular stage, you can also get stuck kind of just hovering between these two stages. So I think you do want to be careful of that at the same time. So
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, because it's easy for me to put lists together, and then that does become very linear. And growth, and especially in a minute we'll talk about kids, how it's not a sequence, but it is a cycle.
Yeah, that's so good. And the own stage is really where we find some uniqueness in the community. We start to take responsibility for our gifts and talents and understand how those things work within the church. So we start to flesh out what our role is and how we're a part of this larger community. And the own stage is great. Most people feel energized. They feel fulfilled. They feel like they're growing in this stage. And I think that really comes down to, Greg talked this past Sunday about the 2 main faith catalysts in this stage are providential relationships and personal ministry. And I know I can attest that these are 2 things that have been very, very crucial in how I've grown in my relationship with Jesus. And this is the phase where, these are pivotal, these are critical to this stage. So how have y'all seen these 2 catalysts, providential relationships and personal ministry, help someone grow in this own stage specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think specifically of the relationships thing, which is kind of a big part of what I do here. We just had Group Link last night, which was super exciting. And one of the best ways to not get stuck is to make sure that you have relationships with other people, right? Because I said last week that there's an element of those relationships that are designed to be fostering and building into your relationship with God specifically, that will keep you grounded at times if you feel like you're getting a little too full of yourself, when we talked about the building stage and acquiring knowledge and information. But then they also will help continue to challenge you if you get a little bit too stuck or a little bit too prideful with this is my whole identity in the Lord is what I do. Well, you surround yourself with other people that will continue to challenge that. They continue to see things differently than the way that you do, and all of that plays into helping you continue to grow through these stages and not get stuck in one of the stages. But if you isolate yourself, that is a recipe for stuck all day, every day. So we really want to be careful of that.
And I would say, and we're going to talk a minute about how that works with kids, but providential relationships are so very important for them because as adults, we have experiences that we have lived through that we can encourage them as they are building their foundation, and they have a lot of knowledge. If they attend church on a regular basis, they get the knowledge part, but the providential relationships is what will help them build that and then own that as they get older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
And that's really a perfect segue into talking about, kids owning their faith. And I know, we have parents watching, and, this is probably the first time they're hearing about these different stages of faith. So parents are probably trying to figure out, okay, where am I on this spectrum? And, but the reality is kids are also in this picture. Kids are also on a journey. They're much earlier on in the journey. Adults have probably gone through a lot of these phases over and over and have bounced between them a lot more than kids have.
Right.
But kids are still on a spiritual journey. So I know you could talk kids ministry and parenting all day long. So Sharlene, how do you guys help kids move from that build phase where it's a lot of knowledge and building up to the own phase where they're
Sure.
starting to take personal responsibility?
Well, we start in preschool. We don't look at our ministry here in our environments as just babysitting. And we also, as kids get older, that we want them to know that they don't just take all this in, but they live it out. And when they live it out, that is when they begin to own that. So we start in preschool and we teach them that God loves me, God made me, and Jesus wants to be my friend forever. And it is at that point in their life, it is about me. And we lean into that because we want them to know it's very personal. Their faith is very personal. And Jesus does love them, and he wants to be their friend forever. So we start in preschool, and as kids get older, we encourage not only the knowledge part, but take it in and live it out. And one way we do the bridging is we do take them from that knowledge base. And then one of our environments that I love especially is for parents and kids together, because we know that partnering with parents is a value that we hold dear, because parents have a lot more waking hours than we do. We've said this a lot, and maybe this is review for some of you, but we have, if you came every week for the whole year, which we know that does not happen.
Yeah.
With sickness, vacations, out
Soccer
of town,
game, all
whatever,
kinds of things.
we know it's not 52 weeks a year. So even if we said 45 weeks a year, or 40 is probably more like it, between 40 and 45 hours we have a year with your kids. Parents have 1,500 waking hours, and that doesn't include school, and all of that. It's 1,500 hours that you have with your kids. And so we want to help start conversations and then give you tools and resources to use those at home. And this is probably one of the most important resources that we give to families, and that's our Jump Start environment. It is actually a presentation, but in the box there are conversation starters where they follow up at home. And these aren't just a one-time thing. They have on the back of the cards talk about it for each part of the salvation story that we start. But it's great for kids to know at a young age that I can go to church and hear a presentation about what it means to have a relationship with Jesus, and then my parents will reinforce that. Now, they don't think that necessarily, but they hear it at both places, and that is when we can tell them this is a safe place. Parents, this is a safe place for the kids to come and ask questions. And that's actually what Jumpstart is about. Is it a presentation, but it also allows them to ask questions about, like, well, is this really real? Kids live in a fairy tale world sometimes.
Sure.
And we tell our kids all the time that what we learn from Scripture and what Jesus said is totally true. And this is the beginning. It's the jump start of a conversation, hence the jump start box. But
Yeah.
we want to take them from what they have learned preschool up until whatever point they come and join this to it's now this is what you know to be true. Now, what does it mean for me? And keeping those conversations going nonstop is very, very important. When you put them to bed, talk about it. It doesn't have to be every night. When I say nonstop, I mean it comes naturally. And it's never too late to start. So if you're in this parenting journey and you yourself had wrestled with these things and you just have come to realization yourself and your kids are older, that's okay too. Because for them to see you live it out will also help them own their faith.
Yeah.
Right.
And kind of playing off of that, like the vision of partnering with parents, that was something that caught on here around Faircreek when I was a little bit older. But I still saw that from my parents, and they still took an intentional effort when I was in, later middle school and even high school. So it's not too late to start. And I'm here today because of how my parents helped me own my faith. It's huge.
And I love the way, it's my wife and I were just talking about this recently because, like I said, I lead Group Link, and we had that last night. And my son, who has been helping in the booth for Kid Street and stuff on Sundays, has... he came home and told me, he's like, next time you have Group Link, you have to let me come, and I'll run the booth and the computer and the sound and stuff for you.
That's awesome.
And he's 10 years old, but the way that you guys impress upon kids at a very early age that they have something that they can contribute to what's going on here is just incredible. And it seems... now that you're in the midst of it and all that, it seems so like, well, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we do that? But it's not always like that in a lot of places. And I didn't have experiences like that as a kid. I remember one of the first Sundays that I came to church here, I remember seeing one of Wade's son, actually, I think ushering or something like that. And it's just like, wow, that's really cool. They actually let kids do stuff here, and so, but again, it just reinforces with kids that you have something you can contribute to this whole thing. You don't have to wait until you're quote unquote old enough or smart enough or whatever in order to be able to do stuff. You can get involved here right away.
Yeah, and that's really a great segue into our next question, Matt, which is, what does it look like for a kid to own their faith?
Right. Well, that is, as Matt said, so very important when they feel like they are part of God's big story, and we tell them that monthly at least, if not weekly.
Yeah.
You are part of God's big story, and it's a story bigger than you can imagine, and He has created you uniquely to make a difference. And so we encourage them from the time they're in preschool, they get to help serve snacks. They get to help pray for their friends. They get to pass things out. When we use that, we try to use the terminology of serving so that they get that in their mind at a young age. And then when they're older in elementary school, they actually get to be on teams. And the reason why we feel that that is very important for them is because when they feel like they have a place to belong, it will grow their faith. And so whether it's pulling wagons to bring preschoolers up to the door, working in preschool, they do run our booth, and they have mentors who help them through that and learn the particulars of that. But what really warms my heart is when I have seen kids come up through Kid Street, and I'll see on a Sunday morning, the booth is full of kids that got their start next door.
Yeah.
And just when that helps them take ownership of their faith. It makes it so that they're not just learning, but they're seeing how that all fits in their daily life, and then how they can use that to make a difference. So we put a big value on serving, and it also raises parents' awareness and helps them be involved with them as well, because they have to be the ones to get them here. Because, we have, if you're, depending on what team you're serving on, you need to be here by a specific time. And I love to see that parents just take ownership of that and make sure that their kids are here. That's just another way that we can work together as a church and a family to help our kids see that faith is real, and it's important to work it out. It's not works-based, of course, but it is definitely something where they can feel that they are part of God's big story.
Yeah. And we talked about the relationship side of things too, and Sharlene, I'm sure you've seen this play out. You build relationships by doing stuff together too, and so that's a big part of the whole. You talk about cycle, the whole cycle of helping a student or a child or whatever, or even an adult, to be honest, to feel like this is their place and this is their home and they can really make friends here, because you start doing, like, I know my son is friends with people here in the building that he met doing, the booth together with them. He didn't meet them in in his classroom or in part of his, his small group or anything like that. He met them in the booth, and and so I just think you building relationships by doing stuff together too. As adults, we know that that's true, but we just don't necessarily, I think, connect those dots all the time. But
kids are just mini adults, right? And so what we're encouraging adults to do, why wouldn't we start with them when they're younger, so that we're setting them up to be effective, thriving Christians and disciplers of Jesus as they get older? So we have the same model all the way through. Just like you have small groups and we value serving with adults, we have that with kids as well, to hopefully grab their hearts when they're young, and that God can do so much more. So we don't want them to have regrets, and we want to encourage them.
Yeah. So. I think in my mind, one of those like prime examples of someone I grew up with is Celeste. She's one of your small group leaders, and she started when she was in 6th grade. And has been going ever since, 10 years later now or so.
Yes, probably.
So, but.
And so, funny you mentioned her. Last Sunday, we brought her and Kyle up on stage because they're getting ready to have a baby. And I had Shirley pray for her. Shirley is one of our small group leaders. She was Celeste's small group leader. And now she's praying for Celeste's baby, and it was just a cool moment to see that play out. And I think we're getting to maybe widening that circle here in a minute.
That's
one of their next questions. But that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's super sweet. Shirley was also my small group leader, so Shirley's the best.
Ringing endorsement from Grayson.
Ringing endorsement, yeah. So kind of off of that, widening the circle, how can parents help their kids take ownership for their faith?
I would say it's important not only in preschool and elementary, but middle school and high school as well. We need to widen that circle of influence, because there will come a point in time, excuse me, where they will not maybe listen to you as a parent.
What?
That is part of the phase, that is just where it's just part of life. And to have other people that you know and trust to encourage your kids, I think as a parent, that is just phenomenal, because you know that when you widen that circle of influence, they will listen to things that you may have been saying for a long time, but if they hear it in small group and they hear their small group leader say it, who they absolutely adore, then it might catch on and catch their heart. And they might not realize the significance of that at their age, but when they're an adult, they're going to look back and say, I remember, like you just said, Shirley was awesome, because there was somebody else in their life that invested in them. And so that's another way of partnering with the church to make a bigger impact, because when you have more people speaking truth into the lives of your kids, that just sets them up to be thriving adults. And so we do everything we can. We're always looking for those people, though, to step up and do that, because that's how we partner with parents.
Yeah. And it's really like two sides of the same coin, right?
Right.
I am here, in the position and, where I'm at in life today because of my parents in a lot of ways and how they helped me own my faith. But I also had just so blessed to have so many people invest in me growing up here. And I'm just so grateful for all those people who took the time to say yes to the next generation. And I know, like, as a parent and, as a parent and a grandma, I think we're all just so grateful for the people who are willing to say yes and take ownership for their own faith in a lot of ways and begin to serve and do. But, it does have an impact.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Those kids might not remember everything you say or everything you teach them, but they'll remember how they felt, how you made them feel in a small group, and they will catch things that they won't realize they're catching until they're adults. And so you get to help shape and mold, just like Jesus uses the example of clay. We get to help shape and mold their vessels so that when they are ready to be on their own, they have such a good foundation that they can build on, they can take ownership of, and then that they can thrive because of people that invested in them. And we do it because that's what Jesus calls us to do. He calls us to make disciples and to start. If you look at Matthew, he talks about, and in Acts, he talks about at home, and then a little bit further out, and then to the ends of the earth, right? Yeah. And so we get to do that, and I get to be a part of the at-home part right now with these kids, and it's just so fulfilling when you see them finally, the light goes on, and then you see them take that next step, come to Jumpstart, and then we get to cheer them on when they take their next step and get baptized and put that stake in the ground that I'm a Jesus follower, and I want everybody to know that. And I just love the fact that we have a church that does invest in the next generation, and that a question that we ask frequently is, what is the faith of the next generation worth?
Right. Yeah.
Well, you can't put a price on that, right?
Yeah.
It's worth everything.
Yeah.
Because we want them to follow us as we all age out of ministry. You're just starting in it. And Matt, you're not too much older, so you guys are. You're still, young enough that you have many years ahead of you. But we need those people to follow through, not just in ministry, but just living like Jesus wants them to live in their communities and their workplace and everything. And it starts with a firm foundation.
Yeah, and from a family perspective, we truly view it as a partnership, as teamwork. I mean, eventually, moms and dads out there, your kid is going to come to you at some point, and they're going to be like, well, my small group leader at church said that I should be nicer to my sibling, and so I think I'm going to be nicer to them. And you could either say, I've been trying to tell you that for your whole entire life. Or, like, for me, when that kind of thing happens, I'm just really grateful that I've got somebody in my corner helping me back up those principles, because it sounds different for some reason. It sounds different coming from your small group leader or someone you look up to than it does coming from mom and dad. Well, you're supposed to say that. You have to tell me to be nice. It's your job. But it just sounds different coming from a friend or from, a peer or somebody that you look up to. And that's why it's a partnership. It's also not an opportunity for us to be like, see, we got your kid to be nicer, aren't we? Awesome. Like, no, it is a teamwork situation. We want to be there to back up and support what you're doing at home, and vice versa. Like, we really want to work together to do this.
Right. What you were talking about reminded me of they call it the Tony Dungy principle.
Okay.
Because he wrote a book. He put this in example. I mean, he's like NFL coach, right?
Yeah.
And he had a son in middle school or high school, and he had been trying to get him to eat a good breakfast every morning. He'd sleep till the last minute, wouldn't get out of bed. And he's been preaching this for years, and he is an NFL coach. Right. He knows what it takes to be physically fit, ready to do the job, right?
Sure.
Son wouldn't listen to him until his coach told him, you probably should be eating a really good breakfast to start your day right. And then, so the next day, he's eating a big breakfast and like, what am I?
I've been trying to tell you.
Liver? I've been saying this forever.
Yes.
And all it takes is for that one other person to say the same things you've been saying, and it just, you're right, they hear it differently. And it's not something we can play with, though, because this is eternal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a football game, and it's not, your extracurricular activities that you want them to excel in. That's all well and good.
Sure.
But this is an eternal principle that we want to make sure that we imagine the end, so that we can see, and then you work backwards. Whatever you want your kids to be as thriving adults and disciplers of Jesus, work backwards, figure out what needs to do, what you need to do, and then how to get them there. And then that's where we come in. We want to partner with you to get them to that place where they are thriving disciplers of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Well, we know on a journey we could get stuck along the way. Traffic jam, you lose 5G, 4G connection, Google Maps goes out, and you're lost. I don't know what I would do in that situation.
I had that happen in Atlanta, and that was not fun.
No,
and
not good. It's not okay.
Not okay. But we know it's a normal experience to get stuck.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, like, the own phase has really kind of been preached as the end-all, be-all for some of us. So, some of us find ourselves in this place where we're stuck, in this own phase. And the own phase is great. Like we talked about how it's energizing and fulfilling, and how a lot of people are in this phase. But we can also be stuck in this phase for a long time. And a few characteristics of being stuck in this phase are, instead of being filled by what, our calling and what Jesus would have us do, we're fueled by ambition and not obedience. We're feeling exhausted and burnt out. We're really just in a spot where we're emotionally unhealthy. And that's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
I imagine, I've felt a lot of that, and you just feel so stuck in that spot. You're like, I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do,
Right.
but I'm still stuck here. As people who have been walking with Jesus for longer than I have, what advice would you guys give that person who's just stuck in the spot and they're feeling burnt out? They're, emotionally distraught. They're probably anxious. They're doing the right things, but the tires aren't turning. What advice would you give that person?
Well, I suppose one thing that I would say, and as it kind of go off of what you were saying, is you alluded to the fact that this isn't the end. This isn't the be-all, end-all. This isn't the goal that you're trying to, man, if I can just get there, then I'm done. So the first step, I think, is recognizing there is a stage after this. And so we're going to talk next week about the Thrive stage. I don't want to get too far into that, but there is a stage after this. So if you know that, then hopefully that will open you up to thinking, well, how do I explore getting to that point? And then I would say the way to get there, unfortunately, I think the Thrive stage often requires a stage of transition where you're going to maybe be rethinking some things or seeing things differently. Maybe you experience something that's hard or painful or difficult. But I think for people who are stuck in this own stage, you got to find a way to get out of your comfort zones. You got to find a way to stretch yourself to continue to try to explore. It's really easy at this stage. One, maybe to get a little too wrapped up in being identified by what you do, but also to get really comfortable doing the things that you do. It's like, okay, well, I found, an area where I can serve in the local church, and maybe I, also connect with a local food pantry or something on a regular basis. And those are the things I do, and that's it. And then you just get really comfortable kind of hitting the repeat. Every morning you hit the turn the alarm clock off and you go boom, and you just back to the same routine every single day. If you get stuck into a repetitive routine like that, you're going to end up, I think, finding yourself stuck in this stage. Whereas if you're forcing yourself to maybe take that sometimes scary, sometimes risky step of going outside of your comfort zones, trying something a little bit new, try to learn something new, talk to some different people who maybe have different perspectives from the crew that you're normally used to putting yourself around. All of those things can be really good, I think, to helping a person avoid getting stuck or to get unstuck if they are.
And I would piggyback a little bit. Once you are owning you've built it, you're owning it. Now you're kind of stuck. As adults, you're also part of God's bigger story. And so what can you do to make a difference? And I'm going to shamelessly say that when you step out and if you find someone younger, everybody has someone younger that they can influence. Yeah. And when you do that with the strategy that we have here at Faircreek, it will stretch your faith. It will help you through that transition period, because then your focus becomes on taking all that you have learned and all that you know about God. And it doesn't mean you have to know everything, but Sure. It does mean that you take all that you have learned and then you help someone else come along in their faith journey. And that's when we talk about widening the circle. That's when you can step in and be that voice of reason and that other mentor that helping parents widen that circle to it will blow your mind. I think, because then you're preparing then not just for yourself, although you do learn a lot. We learn life apps every month, and I always learn something more for me. But by learning those things and then bringing kids along, it's transformative. And I think to be part of something in someone else's life can help you get through that transition and realize that, yeah, I might be doing all the right things. I might be reading my Bible. I might be praying. I might be doing all of these things. And now it matters more because I'm leading someone else. And so that's when that also then can spark, your faith, because it has to be real for you before you can lead someone else. So taking that step and helping us widen the circle for our families would be huge in helping with that transition.
Yeah. I think something that's really stood out just from our conversation is from this week and last week is how you build and how you own is going to affect how you make it through or really bounce up against this wilderness transition that we keep alluding to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. We're probably going to have to talk about that a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Sharlene, thank you for coming on the podcast
absolutely.
with us.
It was
It's been
fun.
awesome having you on. Do you have anything you would like just to tell people, or maybe how they could own their faith and start serving?
Sure. There is, if you have the church app, there is a place, a tab where you can hit serve, and you can sign up today to make a difference in the life of the next generation. Yeah. And so I would love to have a conversation with you so that we can continue helping kids grow and partnering with parents to help them in their journey, because it's not easy. In this last year and a half, 2 years now, it has become even more of a challenge. Without saying anything else, we all know.
Yes.
And I think the more that we can get people who are actually growing in their faith involved in the next generation, we'll be setting those kids up again to be thriving Christians. And so I would love to have a chance to talk with you and see where you would fit on our team.
Yeah.
Because it's not only is it rewarding, it is fun.
Yeah.
And
they do have a lot of fun.
we do have a lot of fun. We have a lot of snacks. So
oh, hey, that's always good.
Hit
Too.
the tab.
Where do I sign?
hit the tab, come, and we'll start that conversation and get you plugged in.
Awesome.
Yeah. So continue to tune in this upcoming Sunday. We have our last segment in our series, Where Are You Going? In the building and online at faircreek.online.church, 9:30 and 11 this upcoming Sunday. The youth band is playing. Talk about
that's
students
awesome.
Owning their faith. They're going to be leading us in worship.
You're not going to want to miss it.
It's exciting. So thank you all for tuning in. We're excited. Make sure you like the video, share it with a friend who's in this stage or is really just has a lot of questions about how you grow, and make sure to subscribe so you could keep seeing podcasts as they come out. But thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. We'll
And
see you
thanks
next
again,
time.
Sharlene.
You're welcome.
Thanks.